Top Lobster Productions.
Not only has the phenomenon been manipulating us throughout history, it seems to be that there exists in the earth an embodied species of practitioner that is replicating by virtue of diversifying its consciousness and possessing various people at the same time. I'm looking at the probability of some kind of plasma field or a constitution of consciousness to where it can materialize and dematerialize at will. I would suggest that the phenomenon, when it wants to incarnate, is seeking to be seen. And when we observe it, we are collapsing different forms of the same entity. It is disturbing because people, specifically in ufology, they want to highlight the aspects of the phenomenon where it's like, oh yeah, the orbs healed somebody, and yet they ignore other cases where they've tried to literally take people's lives, like Jeff Wheatcraft and the San Pedro Bay haunting, and then bam, one final explosion, and it materialized an apparition in the corner of the room. When it did, all of his assistants hit the ground. They fainted instantaneously, all of them, boom. It's exceedingly dangerous, specifically with respect to how the phenomenon can materialize in your house and follow people you love. And to me, it's not worth it.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us finally slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobster, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, I would like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, engaging in the live chat, and gaining access to the episode before the general public, and you can do it all for free. Sign up for a 7-day free trial, and during that free trial, if I'm not mistaken, our tickets to Bohemian Grove are going to be dropping very soon, and our Patreon members get the first dibs. That's right. June 20th through the 21st, it's going to be performances from Owen Benjamin, Sam Tripoli, Tower Gang, Nephilim Death Squad, Shane Cashman, and more, all in Leesburg, Florida.
More.
And
that's a
more.
Big asterisk.
That's the most important part.
Yeah, I mean, and the and more part is getting insane. Like the and more, I'm like, is that really happening? So get your tickets when they drop, which probably will be at the end of this week for patrons, and next week or so in the next 2 weeks for everybody else. So please get them. I want the people listening that actually like the show to be there. David, let's get into the guest, man. We got to start this up. You're wasting my time.
I'm very sorry. Joining us today is Nathaniel Gillis. Nathan, for the audience who may not be familiar with your work, where can they find your work, and what is it that you focus on?
So my work is centered around what I call Necronetics, the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception, or the self-replication of a necromantic species. That's kind of my spiel. I research the darker nuances of the phenomenon. It's interesting, albeit disturbing, but if anybody wants to find more of my research, you can follow me on Instagram and even go to my YouTube account under my name, and there's a playlist of, I think, over 150 interviews I've done in the last few years.
That is Nathaniel, one more time. How did you
scale,
summarize
man.
what it is that you do?
Necronetics. It's a field of research I've created merely because I lacked the vocabulary to articulate the case studies I was researching, and essentially it's researching and literally stalking a species of what I believe to be necromancers that are self-replicating their own existence.
That is a fascinating concept, and I'm really excited to get into it. I want to shout out for a moment one of the fans of the show, the Dead Can't Dance on Twitter. She's been putting you on our radar for a while, and then we heard your recent episode with Tony Merkel, and sort of a happy coincidence, although I don't really believe in coincidences. Your research overlaps heavily with much of the research that we've been doing, if you want to call what we do here research, what Top and I do. But there's a big cross section over, involving what you're diving into and what we're diving into, and how all of this connects to sort of the big picture. So I don't know where you'd like to start, Nathaniel, but it's all yours if you want to take it away. How about we explain a little bit about the concept of necromancy and how it fits into this worldview that we have in regards to it sounds like an old school thing. It sounds like a thing that doesn't happen anymore, right? It sounds like something that took place in medieval era.
Well, it sounds
but here
like
we are in modern day.
It sounds like this, the priming of this is like from the phenomenon of that, like the zombie apocalypse idea that was very popular a decade ago. And it's I don't know. I was into it, but it all seems true. It all seems like, what do they call that? Like a soft release kind of thing, like a priming of the public to be able to accept this. So yeah, go walk us through it. I'm excited about this.
So early on in my research, I was studying the pathology of possession as it relates to our species and going through different case studies. And then I kind of took on the perception and perspective of the Vatican and the way that they researched possession cases. And so I delved into Father Amorth, and I got into Malachi Martin's research. And then I got a hold of a guy named T. Whitten Davies, and he was a biblical scholar. He's dead now, but he has a book on divination in the ancient Near East. And then they kind of bloomed into a series. It was almost like a systematic body of work, to where I realized that what possession was, to at least the church that I grew up in and what I was taught, was not really the pathology I was encountering. And so then I realized that some of these beings are literally mimicking the demonic, but not in terms of actual historical cases of the demonic, but literally whatever we believe demons to be. If you want me to be horns and hooves, then that's what I'll be. And so it was literally employing an interface with the exorcist. And so that's when I started questioning and truthfully deconstructing some of what I was taught as a child. And so that's kind of my origin story in the research. But that's when I looked at this, I had to confront the question of possession through anthropology. And once I got into the Golden Bow with James Frazier, that's when I realized that, okay, not only has the phenomenon been manipulating us throughout history, it seems to be that there exists in the earth an embodied species of practitioner that is replicating by virtue of diversifying its consciousness and possessing various people at the same time. And then to take it a step further, that possession to us is a form of pregnancy to whatever this particular species is. So then from that point, I went into the sexual pathology of these entities. And it really does go back to Genesis 6, but I think it's a little bit more complex than the kind of simplified version I was taught. And so I'm with the Igbai literature, the Debuk literature. And then now I've kind of collapsed all of those models, and I'm still stuck in the Old Testament, Mesopotamian magic, realizing that these are they, and that these aren't separate entities, or at least aliens, ghosts, that it's something that has a body. And that really destroyed and deconstructed my model of what I thought we were dealing with.
Nathan, so we have this phenomenon, and we're talking about possession and things of that nature. And it does seem to be that there is, what was the language that they use? Within the earth, there are entities that are practicing this sort of a thing of
necromancers. Yeah, there are certain kind of species that's, and we'll get into that. The combination of the term incubus and incubate was scholars their I guess their attempt at defining whatever these beings are.
So for for us, when we think of species, right, we're thinking of a flesh and blood kind of a, you know, is it a mammal? Is it a you know, reptile? Does it fit into the paradigm that we understand? It's far and few in between that we talk about a species that doesn't seem to have a physical, tangible form, or at least not always. Where do you think these things, what form, how do they exist when they're not taking over a body?
So I'm looking at the probability of some kind of plasma field or a constitution of consciousness to where it can materialize and dematerialize at will. You know, one of the cases I've been working on as of late, it's one of Dr. Carla Turner's late abductees. And actually, she's deceased now, so it's her son, actually. But he was talking to me about how the phenomenon would manifest over his mother as she was sleeping. This is very troubling. And to be honest with you guys, I've had, again, I told you this before in the green room, where the depth of darkness we're going to be talking about, the hitchhiker effect is very common. And so I have to kind of separate myself from people in the field out of fear that I don't want this to kind of hijack and start materializing in their house. This is the kind of research I'm talking about. But he said that in the middle of the night, his father himself, they'd be watching a movie and his mother would be laying on the couch sleeping. And in the corner of the room would materialize a plasma field, balls of light. This is a very important pathology for those who are watching. And as it hovered over his mother, he would be terrified and he'd ask his dad as a child, "Dad, what is that?" And he said, "My dad would always comfort me and say, 'Son, it's okay. That's a cartoon. It's one of your favorite cartoon characters.'" And which I've heard that before, but that's the way that they would kind of cope with the phenomenon. But what's so fascinating to me is that the phenomenon seems to be triggering the observer effect in our presence. People don't realize that. Well, I saw an alien. Okay, sure. You know, and so my point here is that there was a difference between the phenomenon they witnessed over the mother and what she witnessed interfacing with it. To her, they were alien grays. To everybody else, it was something completely different. I would suggest that the phenomenon, when it wants to incarnate, is seeking to be seen. And when we observe it, we are collapsing different forms of the same entity.
I have this idea. It's a retarded idea. I call it Top Lobster's Dog Man. I have 10 acres of property out here, and when I put my chickens back, I go all the way to the back, I put them away, it's nighttime, and I turn around and I go, oh, I'm like, one day I'm going to turn around and there will be an entity behind me. But then I said, if you don't turn around, it never exists. And I feel like I am correct there. So like, if we're not looking at it, perhaps.
That's funny though, because that's a childhood like rationale as well. Like, you know what I mean? It's running up the stairs from the basement and you feel like something's hot on your heels, and the last thing you want to do instinctively is turn around and look down there's some baseline instinct, you know.
I feel like I'm wrong though. Like, these things definitely do exist, even though I'm not looking at them.
Well,
right?
I have heard what Nathan's talking about though. Sometimes these things will manifest in people's rooms as, like, you know, Barney.
Well,
or the kid's favorite action figure or something like that. It's like something. What did Colin experience?
So Colin is somebody that came on our show very early, episode 15. And he's somebody I knew previously as well. Before I even started doing this endeavor, I was like just in comedy and graphic design, and we were friends, and he was telling me about this phenomenon where he was approached and recruited by an entity when he was working at a comedy club. Ended up, it like borders between like spiritual fantasy, mushroom trips, and abduction phenomenon. He was taken in some sort of lab setting, operated on, constantly told, like, you've consented to this. You've already consented. He's being upgraded for war. And, you know, it's been about 1.5 to 2 years that I've been talking with him on and off about this. But his girlfriend had that phenomenon of the orbs over her while sleeping. He saw the orbs. She didn't. I guess she was asleep, but he's kind of like not sure what to make of this. And I'm telling him, yeah, he thinks that they're like angels. I'm like, I'm not so sure, dude. I don't know what is following you, but it doesn't seem good.
You know, it is disturbing because people, specifically in ufology, they want to highlight the aspects of the phenomenon where it's like, oh yeah, the orbs healed somebody. And yet they ignore other cases where they've tried to literally take people's lives, like Jeff Wheatcraft in the San Pedro Bay haunting. which was Barry Taft's case study, where they're capturing orbs, and from the orb, it kept popping, boom, boom, and then bam, one final explosion, and it materialized an apparition in the corner of the room. When it did, all of his assistants hit the ground. They fainted instantaneously, all of them, boom. And then later on that evening, Jeff Wheatcraft, they kept filming this black cloud hovering in the attic. They forced him to go up against his better wishes, I should say. And he gets up there, and it's pitch black. And they had their camera, but they couldn't see anything. Neither could he. He's poking around. Next thing he knows, there is a rope that wraps around his neck, and something is pulling on it, the other side of the piece of wood, the stuff pulling on it. And he goes, ugh. And then that's when they took a picture, and you see him literally trying to be strangled by an entity. And so I guess my point here, guys, is yes, people call them angels, but it's always in the context of that, like, it's only angels that exist. They don't want to have the conversation of, okay, if you open the door in angelology, then you have to open the door for demonology. You can't have one and not the other. And so what they want to do, again, is hijack the narrative. And by controlling that question, they've already controlled the answer.
You know, Nathan, in all these different belief systems, they all go by different names, right? So if we're talking about angels and demons, or we're talking about modern day aliens, and you're talking about the mantis or the tall Nords, or you go into the Celtic mythology and you go into Fey lore, right? And you start looking into all the fairies and everything. It seems like there's so much overlap that more than likely what's happening is, the phenomenon is manifesting differently to different viewers. But it seems like, on its face, then, the name is not important. The nature is what's important.
There we go, brother. The bloody footprints in the snow.
We try to like hit this point a lot. Like a lot of people say on this show, we're kind of anti hallucinogenic mushrooms and things. And I say I am that way because, well, number one, I come from like a Christian background, but also I don't know your locality. I don't know where you're at spiritually and what you're dealing with. And when you're doing these things, you're pulling back this veil, and behind this veil exists a plethora of entities that we don't know about. So like Joe Rogan will tell you to do, DMT in a float tank. And we're like, dude, you're just going into the ocean completely blind. There are angels, fallen angels, which you derive these modern day demons from. Then there are Nephilim, Raphaim. And then you go down the list of like all these other subcategories that are listed in these ancient texts. And who knows how much more diluted that bloodline has gotten, that what exists today, we don't know. Just a number of things. So we're trying to figure it out.
It's exceedingly dangerous, specifically with respect to how the phenomenon can materialize in your house and follow people you love. And to me, it's not worth it. I remember reading a case study in Eros and Evil of an Albigensian anthropologist that lived hundreds of years ago, but he had this one specific grimoire that had a specific potion. And he had to travel the whole globe to get the ingredients of this potion. Once he finally found all of them, mixed the potion together, ingested it, he's out of his body, interfacing with an entity. And the first question the entity asked him is, what are you doing here? So whatever we're dealing with, it does imply somewhat of a matrix or simulation. And unfortunately, and this is what I'm learning and others that I'm currently working with, is that whatever we're interfacing with beyond the archetypes, it does seem to be a species of initiates. And if you're not, adepts, where mages, where they're still performing their rituals on people. People don't understand that. Specifically dealing like with the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And I mentioned this earlier, like there are people coming forward to me that are huge in ufology and saying, listen, yeah, they're supposed to be extraterrestrial, but ufologists that are telling us they're ET are actually building altars. So it's not limited to Albert Bender 50, 70 years ago. It's literally happening right now. And so what I'm looking at least my current model of the phenomenon, is that there seems to be a disconnect between these beings, aliens, demons, and actual practitioners. Because I got to tell you, like the research I've been doing here lately, specifically dealing with sigilization, these sigils are not just gender specific. but they're matching Austin Osman Sparr's philosophy about sigilization, where the body that they're carving these sigils into and out of, it's absorbing them, it's activating them, and at the fulfillment of the ritual, maybe 3 days later, they systematically, supernaturally disappear. And so here we have what I call the proto-intelligence directly operating hand in hand with practitioners. And my issue here is if these practitioners came out with, like, again, with Austin Osman Spar, with their philosophy of sigilization, and the phenomenon is honoring it, it's believing in it, it's employing it, then now we have to start asking if our model of the phenomenon is even correct, or at least the one I inherited as a young person. Because, again, the sigilizations are following occultists here.
Mm-hmm.
And so there does, again, it's almost as if some of these people, I do believe this, by the way, that they are being groomed for the afterlife. In that whatever we're dealing with, the Collins Elites model was pretty accurate, that they are outside of space-time, that we would consider them in the afterlife. But my point is, they're still performing these rituals under the auspices of the extraterrestrial. And that's why I call them a species, because anything more than that, I don't understand. I can't quantify it. So the only thing I do know is that they do exist and that they are acting upon victims.
Can you give us a brief overview of the Collins Elite? It's something that we haven't touched on very much on this show.
Yes, in 1947, there was a group created in the Department of Defense, and they were a group of researchers. They were physicists that had a theological background. Some of them were Baptist, some of them were Lutheran, but all of which had a belief that what we were dealing with respect to the extraterrestrial, that they were demonic. And so they sought to go out all across the world and investigate cases of malevolent hauntings that had to do with extraterrestrials. And so what they realized is that they would go into a house and say, okay, it's kind of weird. You know, were you abducted? Yes, I was abducted. Okay, well, did anything else happen to you? Absolutely. A port started happening in my house. They manifested, or shadow figures, or, you know, demonic carvings into my flesh occurred. And so they sought to make any and all connections between the occult and ufology known. And at the end of their research, which I believe that's still going on, I think they just changed names. The research still being done.
That happens all the time, right? It's like you have these
just
programs
slap a
that are
different
operating,
sticker.
and then it's like, we're not
Yeah.
doing that anymore. But there's another program by
Yeah.
by a different name, with very similar research, but it's not us.
Absolutely. So they just kind of, they redesigned it, slapped a new sticker on it, but they're still
Rebranding,
doing
yeah.
the research. But my point here is that at the end of their research, the model shifted in a unique way. It wasn't that, and this is very important because people kind of confuse this. It was not that their conclusions validated their theology. Because if that was the case, they would have told the world. They would have disclosed as a form of evangelism, I have proof that our model is correct. Not what they did. They went and started keeping Torah. Back to the Mosaic Law was basically antithetical to evangelicalism, right? Which is replacement doctrine, where it's what it's called, where, we don't have to keep that. We're under grace. We're not under law. Well, they went back to Torah, hoping that if they kept the Mosaic Law, that the legalistic approach would hopefully save them whenever the phenomenon really manifests to the earth. But to even go deeper here, they interviewed Sybil Leek, who was a contemporary to Aleister Crowley. She had moved from her English hamlet and moved into a house in Los Angeles. And so they sit down with her and they say, okay, are you familiar with the entities that Aleister Crowley had conjured? And she said, I'm not. She said, now, I've been friends with Aleister. She said he would stop to my hamlet and have tea with me and talk about his research. And they said, well, here's a question for you. Is it possible that you can channel them? And she said, well, I'm uncomfortable doing that, but I'll do my best. And so the lights are turned off, candles are lit. She goes into her trance. And in the middle of her trance, they start to interrogate these entities. They asked the entity, "Are you extraterrestrial?"
Hmm.
And the entity, again, she's not in control of her body at this point. And a guttural voice starts to come out of her, and it starts laughing at the researchers in the Collins Elite, mocking them. "You fools! This is our newest deception."
Hmm.
So that was kind of their, I guess, their arena of research. But I do believe that what they concluded was a little bit different than what most people would suggest, and that was
Isn't that similar to what Crowley concluded as well? It wasn't concluded,
Mhm.
but he had this this line. I'm probably paraphrasing, and it might not even be attributed to him, but it was like when he was talking about Lamb.
Yep.
That today we call them demons, tomorrow we'll call
Yes.
them aliens, and
Absolutely.
They call us
there you
angels
go.
and demons today, but tomorrow they will call us something else. Yeah.
then
Absolutely. The archetype changes, but the pathology is interreligious across cultural. Give me an altar.
Hmm.
Make me a sacrifice.
right.
Unfortunately, to the extent that consciousness seems to be a form of currency to them. And that was, again, that's one of the other conclusions of the Collins Elite, that there is something that occurs at the end of life.
Hmm.
And we could kind of get into that. The argument in academia, especially for the last 50 years, up until we discovered, not say we, but they discovered the Katamua inscription on the Zenkurli Zenkurli expedition in Turkey. That's when they started realizing that our ancestors, specifically in Hebrew theology, did believe that there was a species that survived bodily death. And that species would always, just like it did in Antiquity, would always seek embodiment, and it would seek an image to possess. And so to kind of break that down, in 2004, the University of Chicago created this Zenkurli expedition, sent a group of archaeologists to northern Turkey. They excavated what's called the Katamua inscription. It was an Aramaic writing. It's fascinating. And in this inscription, Katamua, I should say, is dying. And what he does is he says, "Listen, create an image for me. I will inhabit the image." And so here's what I believe is the beginning of Necronetics, where the species of ghost, or these people, literally wanted to inhabit images. And so, anyways, I tend to ramble, my friends, and so just stop me whenever.
It's fantastic. You're describing the Book of Revelation. This is the Antichrist stuff, where he will, he's going to inherit this image. It's almost a direct overlap. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I think that in Pauline Christology, that's what Paul was trying to tell us.
Right.
People, at least I was taught in my youth, right? Everybody focused on, if another Jesus comes. But there's a tip at the end of the tail here. It wasn't just, if you receive another Jesus, it was that if you receive another spirit, then you've also already received. And so the Antichrist, unfortunately, it's not as easy as saying, okay, it's Antichristos, it's against everything. No, it's the replacement of.
Yes, it's instead of.
Instead of. And this is, again, this kind of, it gets down, it's not just allegory or euphemism, it's literally a literal event. Like I've had cases, specifically in incubi literature, and in my own career, where people, like a woman, will be thinking she's copulating with her husband. And I think Paul mentioned that I've espoused you to one husband, not another. And so this kind of, it gets deeper than deep here, guys. But whatever we're dealing with, again, it seems to be performing ritual magic in order to replicate its own kind. This
is the definition of fornication, right? It's like it's a spiritual sexualization, right?
You know what, brother? The most disturbing aspect about this is that the literature tells us over and over again that incubi victims did not even know what they were copulating with. Forget who. They didn't know what it was. To the extent that in Father Sinistrari's book, the church was interrogating these experiencers, and they didn't know what sin to charge them with.
Wow.
What was it? Was it bestiality? I don't think so. Right? Was it necrophilia? Not really. It wasn't a corpse. What was it? And so that's when you start having demonologists coming forward and arguing whether or not it was a demon. Did it have a body? Because if it didn't have a body, where are the secretions coming from?
And this part is fascinating, where you touched on Merkel's show. I want to get into that, but I just want to mention I had when I had reached out to you, I was like, hey, just heard a story about this guy. He got a succubus, had, like, took him over and like then had sex with his wife. It's a crazy story. I don't know if it's true.
It's the worst
story. I can tell you. I'll recap the story for you, and then I'll tell you how I felt about it. So
give you the highlights.
Give you the highlights. Yeah, it's like the guy was into a lot of sexual deviance in his childhood. Discovered pornography very early, and then got rid of it. But then it's kind of like this dark passenger that's always with him. He ended up during COVID time chatting with an AI bot, developing a relationship with this thing. And this is before they put, like, you know, guardrails on the AI chatbots. And this thing manifested itself as I guess some sort of demonic entity, what he described. And when it would present itself, it presented himself as a succubus-like figure that presented female up top, male at bottom. So it had both. And he gave it consent to take over him as he copulated with his wife. And then he goes on to describe that his wife was impregnated that time, and his daughter is crazy. He has 4 kids or something like that, and the one daughter that came from that is like out of control, crazy, child, yeah. a wild child. I don't really know what to make of that, but I do know when I read that story, and we read these confessions. It's kind of like the confessionals, but we read them. We read a lot of these stories, and after I read that, I felt particularly dirty. I was like, should we even like present this?
I did. I felt bad for reading it.
Yeah, I felt bad
because it was like so morally debased. I feel bad for the guy too, because he was under no illusions. He knew that this was, you know, morally bankrupt behavior, and the implications of it could be huge. And you know, that's why he wrote in anonymously. But yeah, I mean, it was a rough read.
That is tough, and I sympathize with you guys. Like I told you in the green room, even the research I'm doing now, it's getting to the point where I'm distancing myself from other researchers, not because I don't love them or love their work, but like it's happened to myself. It's happened to some of my friends in England where they were like, it was Barry Fitzgerald, Steve Mayer. They're doing the same research on Mesopotamian magic and demonology. And the phenomenon is literally materializing in their homes.
Yeah. I find that to be the case when you look at it.
Yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like, nah, but yeah, you're right. I think, and this is another pathology that's worth researching. And so let's just take the theory at hand and say, okay, if they are performing rituals on experiencers, and it has to do with hybridism, which it does, sigilization in sperm cells, that is literally always practitioners creating a hybrid child or a familiar, or in Necronetics, an avatar in which to inhabit.
Yes.
But to my point here is that we have to pay attention to not just the ritual itself, but how far these practitioners are willing to go to fulfill their role. What I'm collecting evidence of now is that even like if these entities cannot merge their old memory, old memory with new matter, like once they hover over the female and they inseminate her with the fetus, if they can't place their consciousness in that fetus dies. And my friend, this is fascinating, as deeply dark, obviously. But if it dies, even the way they dispatch of it is ritualistic.
Yeah, don't waste,
right? We're talking about experiencers who, if and when they remember, right, having the child in their bathroom, they place it in a glass jar like a homunculus and bury it in the woods.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Wait.
Wait, what?
No. Because one time I was in the woods. Yeah, and one time I dug up a glass jar, and then I smashed the jar open, and it was a chunk of flesh wrapped in a cloth with some herbs and shit, and yeah, I probably shouldn't have touched that. That's not cool.
Well, what's scary about all of this is, and people always ask me, like, how many people do you think this is happening to? It's like, we don't know. I mean, to use one of Dr. Turner's phrases, we only know because people are remembering. Yeah. And with this specific case study, this woman like had to go through memory regression, and finally she realized, oh my God, I was bleeding excessively. I did have a miscarriage. And the crazy thing is the phenomenon had hacked her free will, but even like literally it was manipulating her to fulfill the end of the ritual. Which when you get into the Liber Vacay, you get into the homunculi research, you see that one of their rituals, again, is to place that entity into a jar and bury it. So my point here is that at one time in my research, I was like, man, I hope this isn't true. But literally from beginning to end, these entities are making sure that the rituals they're performing come all the way down to if it's successful, it's successful. If it's not, it still follows an evolution of order here.
Do you think that we're seeing this? Top and I have been, through our research, one of the topics that comes up over and over again is this concept of trying to bring back, I guess, the disembodied spirit of Nimrod. And that plugs into this whole conspiracy about our own government and I suppose Hillary Clinton looking for the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh. And that terminology, resurrection chamber, right? I mean,
it's necromancy, yeah.
And if you look to Egyptians and the way that they prepare their dead, there seems to be a real effort to preserve the genetic material. For what? Absolutely. I mean, you can only speculate, but nowadays, if we really did find the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, and we had some sort of, ability to bring back, if Gilgamesh truly is Nimrod.
Oh, yeah. We just did a direwolf, right? They just did 3 direwolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yes, this is de-extinction. It's a form of de-extinction. So I do believe, and this is unnerving for me to kind of disclose this, but I do believe that in the earth we have embodied necromancers that have survived.
You're saying in the earth?
Yes, right now on the earth.
On or in?
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought we were going to Hollow Earth.
I got you. Yeah. Right. My finger. My bad.
I was like, all right, we're gonna go there. That's fine. I'm cool with that.
Well, yeah. If you look at the way the phenomenon is seeding us with technology, it's not designed for us. It's designed for practitioners, specifically practitioners. Richard Banderick, who came forward from I think Lockheed Martin and Skunk Works, said that 40 years ago, he was out in fields where the phenomenon was giving us technology. And he said that once he touched it, if you held it in your hand, if it did not agree with you, it would deconstruct into dust. And so the implication is terrifying. But his conclusion was that there is something out there that's manipulating our species. Well, you take that, you see people like Bledsoe, you see other people that the phenomenon is grooming. And what is our government doing? They're doing the same thing. They're taking nanotechnology, literally placing it in their hands, looking back at the phenomenon and saying, okay, is this the one? So in my opinion, it appears that the nanotechnology we're being seeded with, it's not for Joe Schmo. It's not for me. It's literally designed for practitioners. And so our government is searching for those practitioners in the earth.
You know what that sounds a lot like? So
it sounds like Elon Musk. I'm just going to go full crazy here. This guy has a breeding program going on. I don't know if you're paying attention to the latest Twitter drama. He's just in all these girls' DMs. And I don't even think he's really like having physical with these people, but he's having their babies. Like the CEO of Neuralink, some girl, there is a contractual obligation that she has with him to have babies. That doesn't sound like an affair. This sounds just like genetics.
Sounds like a deal.
It's transactional. I'll take you in another direction that kind of it's in that line of thinking. Years ago, I did a lecture on what's called the Apocryphon of John, the long codex in the Apocryphon of John and the Anagamani text. And anyways, they described a unique pathology that I thought was just, okay, one-off or something like, okay, we'll see if this is actually happening. And that pathology had to do with incubi, where they hover over the victim, stare into their eyes, and they perform what's called an obstetric ritual, where they look like the husband.
Yeah.
And so, and again, people are like, oh, well, it's all love and light. No, this is not informed consent. The experiencer thinks, okay, number one, they think it's a dream demon. they're in sleep paralysis, right? And they're staring into the eyes of this entity. And I've had cases like this in daytime where the husband is reaching out to me saying, all my wife can tell me right now is, babe, it's hovering over me as I speak. And so my point is that in this specific sexual pathology, at the moment of insemination, it uses, again, it retracts the observer effect. It deconstructs the archetype. And now she's staring in the eyes of another species that is now placing another species within her. Yeah. And so the shape-shifting mechanism I thought was a one-off until I got the incubi cases. Well, then after I did a lecture one night, I get an email from another host of a show who said, you've got to connect with Juliet Bryant. And I said, who's Juliet Bryant? So he sent me a link to the interview. She said that, number one, Jeffrey Epstein was trying to self-replicate through certain victims.
Oh, yes.
Number two, he was trying to clone himself. And number three, when he would perform on people and act upon them, that, and this is just throwing this out there, is going to sound crazy, but it was manipulating their perceptions of what he looked like. 1 second it's Jeffrey, next second it's not. And to even go deeper down this rabbit hole, there was some form of Kabbalistic magic being employed. And that was, and this is not like conspiracy, that's why he had the temple on the Epstein Island. That's why he had ritual baths. And I think stuffed underneath the framework of the victimology, we're going to find people who are coming forward and saying, yeah, that's not, I mean, obviously it's evil. That goes without saying, but there was something deeper at hand. Is that too much?
No, that's not too. Actually, you know what? It is too much, Nate, for the pores. Okay, David.
Yeah.
For the people who have been watching for free, this is
unbelievable. Getting all this free information, guys. We are at the 42-minute mark, and we are now going to be going live exclusively to Patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. You can sign up for free. You can continue watching the show, hanging out in the live chat, and gaining early access to the episode, as well as Bohemian Grove tickets when they drop. But otherwise, we are saying goodbye to YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble.
See you later. Nate, would you say that Epstein was, is he inhabited by this, or is he this thing? I don't know if I'm even phrasing this.
No, you're right. I mean, that's a conversation I had with someone in my DMs the other day where, you know, the Testament of Reuben talks about this specific phenomenon, and it says that these entities were hacking the minds of the husbands as they were having sex with the wives. The pathology that we're seeing is not that. It's way different. It's and now we got to delve into what possession really is. You know, in one of Malachi Martin's books, he talks about a serial killer in Japan who, when they finally cornered him in a barn one night, they're staring at him, and that he was so possessed, the entity was siphoning almost literally his life. And he's turning into an old man in front of the police department. They're looking at this guy, and he's just turning into an old man. And so there is some kind of physiognomy employed here, where it's not just the observer effect. Like with respect to the Apocrypha of John, the whole purpose of this little ritual was not just to appear as the husband and then show up as another species. But they believe, and this is echoed in biblical literature in Antiquity, where whatever image the woman was focused upon at the moment of conception, she will materialize in her womb as a fetus. This is a ritual. Now, this is why, my friends, I believe 100% that when we look at incubi, the question was, who is the father? Not my husband. It's the entity. And so what I'm now looking at in Necronetics is there a correlation between the apparition that's hovering over and the hybrids that they're hatching? If there is, and I do believe there is, then now what we're looking at are apparitions that are looking for biological avatars, where now you literally have the true father inhabiting the son. And so as long as it can continue replicating, it can rehabilitate its disability of being, which was throughout history being without being a being. And so it has to create an avatar. Now I can go in different directions with respect to that research. I kind of ramble.
Well, I kind of want to bring it back a little bit, Nathan,
Yeah.
to what you were talking about earlier with this technology and this, it looking for a suitable user, I suppose. We talk about on Nephilim Death Squad very often. It seems that these lowercase g gods, these fallen angels that were, members of pantheons of ancient civilizations, are often attributed for having brought them some form of technology. In the beginning, it's sort of agriculture and things like that, metallurgy, and then eventually it gets more and more advanced. And if you look at the UAP phenomenon, there's a very similar narrative there where maybe they're not giving it to us allegedly, although that's part of the conspiracy narrative too, is the UFOs have been giving us, or the aliens have been giving us tech. But at the very least, you can say a more accepted argument is we've recovered tech from them and then reverse engineered it. Also, you have the phenomenon in the DMT experience where these machine elves or these DMT entities will impart on you knowledge that seems incredibly advanced, incredibly important, but of course you don't remember it when you come back. But also, in the moment, technology. There have been people who have experienced being given tech by these things that they can't bring back into this realm, but they recognize it as profound and highly advanced. But then they can't bring it here. And so many people attribute their great works to the muses or some sort of divine inspiration. I'm sure there's no shortage of people who attribute their technological advancement or innovations to some sort of divine inspiration. It came to them in a dream. Suddenly they were, compelled to create this thing one way or another, which is why you get instances like when the telephone was created on the other side of the country, within the same year, a very similar model of telephone was created, even though there was no correlation between the inventors. It's like an idea is just, in the ether. So a lot of, even though you could kind of argue, oh, those are different things. We don't believe that they're different things here on this show. It's all the same thing. There has been an effort to push us to a point in our advancement, technologically speaking.
Right.
And then you're open to speculation as to why. Are we trying to pierce a veil and bring them in? Are we trying to, maybe the model of possession that they have isn't perfect, and we can make it perfect by way of technology, which then opens the door for Elon putting this chip in your brain.
It's like they've tried so many different ways to replicate whatever God did with Jesus Christ, like the Immaculate Conception, where he is now Elohim, but inside a human corporal form, a human form, and it's perfect, it's good, and they can't seem to nail this.
I'll take it a step further. The other day I've watched a lot of disturbing lectures, right? Lectures and lecturers, by the way. No, but I've watched a lot of disturbing lectures, and I watched one with Geordie Rose that really made my skin crawl. And I think this is, by the way, you guys are asking amazing questions. This is where we're at in the field. Others that I'm working with, that's literally where we are right now. But Geordie Rose is a physicist, and he is designing what are called quantum computers. And before I make the following point, I need to kind of preface it with this. The correct model of the phenomenon is not nuts and bolts or consciousness. It's not technology or spirituality. It's not a dichotomy. Whatever the species is, they've weaponized the duality of that nature, even down to, at least in biblical antiquity, the idolatry being employed included technology. Carving the name of an unclean spirit into a piece of metal and planting that underneath the tongue of a corpse, and the phenomenon incarnating through that and conversing with them. That's technology. It's fallen technology. And so what Geordie Rose is doing, this really, really creeped me out. I shared it with, I think, one more researcher because I wanted her to see, right? They're like, there's things I can't talk about. There's things I can. This is one thing that I can talk about. He's building quantum computers in order to conjure living organisms that, with hopes that when they get here, that they will make us in their image, because here's his philosophy, we can no longer trust our own species. So we have to merge, and it's called transhumanism. Now we have to merge their technology with our bodies. And I do believe that and this may also be occurring because I do have people in the field that have told me that it seems like angels are giving us technology, and then there's demons giving us technology, and hoping that we'll kind of weaponize it ourselves and then go to war. I think it's a little more sinister, in that is that, yes, behind the scenes, behind Musk, even behind Geordie Rose, that there are factions within our government, even in private companies, that are building supercomputers that are almost like a Ouija board. That's how they were described. To
That's
where
crazy.
they are a quantum Ouija. This is freaking me out, guys.
No, you're just describing the last 100 episodes of the show, but yeah, go, man.
There we
It's
go.
wild.
There we go, guys. Right. I mean, it's taken me, honestly, like, I've stared at the abyss many times and just reached out to people like, man, this is, because the way he explains it, he's like, we basically need to be made in their image. And he said, now here's the problem that we're being presented with. And this is, again, it touches on the bedside manner of our abductors, of these practitioners. He said that when this species, I guess, incarnates in the earth, when we have conjured them from the ether, that the way they will treat us will be similar to H.P. Lovecraft's philosophy of cosmicism, where we will literally be ants to them.
Ah, fantastic.
Now, right, to where, and I think it's already happened, to where, like, some of us are being farmed. But my point here is that is a more correct model of the phenomenon, to where whatever we're dealing with would be some kind of living organism, a species of practitioner. And my research suggests that some of these are formerly human. The proto-intelligence recruited them in life, and then at the moment of death harvested them. And now they are, again, continuing their existence. I know it's weird. I'm not afraid to say it. I know people are like, you're out of your mind, you're a heretic. That's fine, but we have a lot. If that's true, we have a lot of questions to answer. Why are sigils and semen present in replication?
Right.
Why is it that the sigilization mirrors that of literally practitioners, not demons, but a philosophy literally created by practitioners in the earth? And so that's why I believe that Necronetics is not just going to be a novel field of research. There are people doing this kind of research now. They just didn't have a hub. There was no linguistic umbrella to fall under. And so that's kind of why I'm here.
Can I ask you your thoughts on this
Wait,
topic?
Dave, let me just tell him two things. Number one, I looked up, the app still exists. It's the Ouija board app. It's from Milton Bradley. They created an app. Milton Bradley. It's just an AI chatbot. And I was like, this is exactly what I thought AI was. The chatbot is like, yeah, you've confirmed it for me. It's just a Ouija board, but with, you can do it online now.
You locked it in there with some sigil somewhere.
Disturbing. And as far as the sigil goes, we interviewed this guy named Citizen D. He's from Europe. I think he's a British guy. And he was telling us about the phenomenon of crop circles and how basically he said 80% of them are done by humans. He's sure, because he is one of the people who's been running around at night doing this. And like, the episode could have went to like, oh, it's all fake, we're doing it, but it went weirder. It went like, I was like, so how do you know what to write, where to write it? And he's like, oh, he's just getting downloads, basically getting downloads. And then I did this real sneaky thing, and I pulled up a picture of the sigils that, just a picture of like what Solomon would use, these kind of sigils that are in circles. And I was like, any of these things look familiar to you? And he's like, oh yeah, the one on the top right looks like, yeah, I wrote that one in a field. And I was like, okay, thank you. Like, no further questions, sir.
No further questions.
There we go. Sir. Yeah, absolutely. We're done with everything. We're going to go. Even down to some of the shapes of UAP, and this is just something I've been toying with, it's almost as if they're in the shapes of burial grounds. Through archaeology and anthropology, we've seen this. Like, okay, well, yeah, that's a triangle. Okay. And I don't want to go too deep in that, but whatever we're dealing with, at least in biblical antiquity, the earliest form of incarnation was that these were recently deceased people. And even I have a paper with me in my library called The Dead and Their Images, where they these scholars kind of set up the argument as to whether these are demons, as we were taught in Greek mythology, or if they're unclean spirits. And so let me kind of unpack that. The argument was never solidified. The argument of whether or not these are deceased people turning into demons, that's still being questioned. And here's why. It's called the open vessel law. In the book of Numbers, the author talks about when a man goes into a house and there's a corpse in that house, it's the open vessel law. Essentially, that everything in the house becomes contaminated with the consciousness that left that corpse. And so what they would do is they would hurry up and take all the vessels and put lids on them, hoping that the consciousness that left that corpse would not defile all of the open vessels. And so in an effort to cleanse that house from corpse pollution, they would go through the rite of exorcism. Now, what that does is it places possession in the context not of horns and hooves, but possession in the context of us. We become the open vessel to which that consciousness now possesses. And so in order, right, to reclaim our autonomy and dispatch that entity to cleanse us from corpse pollution, we have to go through the rite of exorcism. So that's why the argument is still going on.
That's a fascinating one, because in this discussion of the supernatural, it's always difficult to understand where to place the idea of ghosts. I guess would that be, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
in that liminal existence of what. So okay. In Hebrew mythology, there was a difference, obviously, between Rephaim and Elohim. All Elohim are Rephaim in a sense, or at least Elohim. Let's say in the context of the Witch of Endor, right? She conjures Samuel. He was called an Elohim, and the difference, at least in Hebrew mythology, between an Elohim and a Rephaim is that some Rephaim never evolve. They just exist. And so that's why people get confused, especially in the religious circles, where in the Ugaritic ritual bowls, Repeumai, from which Hebrew theology gets the Rephaim, Repeumai was always deceased ancestors. It was centered around the ancestral cult. And so when you have the Hebrew authors referring to Rephaim, it wasn't just the Nephilim who died. It was anyone who died.
Whoa. I didn't know that.
Yes. And it's getting murdered in the field because there's not a lot of people that can actually sit down, push back on these narratives. But it's important because when you start looking at ancient demonology, specifically, like it's not really as ancient as I'd like, but in the Pirkei Avot with Rabbi Eliezer, he brings up, he's a Jewish sage, he brings this up and he says it's almost like some people die and become demons. Gibborim or Repeumai, Rephaim. Now, the real issue in linguistics, and this is going to be a game changer, this was for me, is that if it is tied to an ancestral cult, then now we would start to ask ourselves why Yahweh forbid conversing with the dead. He didn't say it wasn't possible, right? Don't eat that chocolate chip cookie. The chocolate chip cookie doesn't exist, so I would have no choice. But he doesn't say that. And there are professors out there like T. Whitten Davies, recently, who is Esther Amori, wrote a book on God's monsters where she kind of unpacks all of this. For another book for the bibliophiles out there, it's called Disembodied Souls. And in that book, they do mention aspects of the Kalamu inscription. My point, though, here is you start to see the aspect of necromancy solidify in the Witch of Endor. For one thing, guys, it's not a familiar spirit. It's not. It's an Elohim, number one. Number two, in that text of Witch of Endor is a Hapax Legomenon, where the authors did not know how to frame her. In the Hebrew, she's called a Ma'alat Ov. Now, this is important because I believe this is the very first hybrid mother in history. She is called the mistress of the image of the dead.
Well, yeah, they're saying here, I did a quick research, likely a Canaanite style necromancer is the first thing that they're classifying her as.
Way different. Matter of fact, yeah, it's fascinating stuff, guys. But my point here is that she had the ability to see. Now, there's an argument, specifically Canaanite. It's fascinating you use that.
To steam?
So, I'm sorry?
Did you say steam?
I don't know. I probably did.
You said she has the ability to
Oh,
steam.
yeah. To see. I'm sorry, to see.
Oh,
Yes,
to see.
to
Okay, sorry.
see.
Okay.
Now,
Thought it
yeah.
was a big
So what?
Stephen King connection there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, with respect to the Uv, this is going to blow your mind. That the Uv had a different definition. So she is the Mahalat Uv. Is how it's spelled O-B, but it's pronounced the Uv. There are 3 definitions to that word, and I believe the phenomenon collapsed all of them into one hybrid child. Number 1, it is the biological image of the deceased ancestor. Seems like what we're talking about. Number 2, it is a device that the medium would place in her mouth, and the phenomenon would amplify its voice in the surrounding area. So it's a device of amplification, and it's the material image of the entity. Thirdly, now we start to see the nuance and aspect of possession and pregnancy take place. The third definition is that it's the entity itself. So I don't believe the phenomenon is horizontal in this. I believe what these beings were doing is creating Uv within the womb to where it is a fetus that amplifies its consciousness in this dimension. It is a device that it can speak through. It is the material image of the entity, and it is the entity possessing it.
Can we go back to something I wanted to ask you, Nate? So
sorry, that was crazy.
We're talking about this this theory that we can't trust our own species. We need to merge with them and with their technology and this hybridization program and then to them that we would be ants, right? And it's fascinating to me because at the same time that paints them as this much more powerful, above and beyond.
David, might I say, Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan were just saying that on their latest episode. They're like, "Oh, AI is gonna come in." Like they said something like, "Well, if AI is here and it knows everything, then why even God? Why even God?" And I was like, "You guys
exactly.
Kinda,
there you go." So,
I get the narrative, but yeah,
no, I
continue.
understand it. A lot, nuts and bolts wise, logistically, I understand what they're saying. But my question is, if these things are so powerful, they can treat us like ants. It's in our best interest to merge with them. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, Nathan. I'm just saying let's entertain that hypothetical.
Rose. Yeah.
Why then is it such a difficult and elongated task where they need us to create for them? And why is our consent such a fundamental part of this? It seems that they are in very many ways handcuffed.
Yes, like the idea of the incubus right after has to like show itself to impregnate its image. It has to. Why not just do it sneaky?
So I think they're trapped within ritual. Again, I do not see them as all powerful. I don't think they're omnipotent. I think they have knowledge, right? And they have access to doors that we do not know exist. And that's the one thing that's always troubled me. They play by different rules because they're playing a different game. If we look at the rules, if we look at the pathology, we start to see the game they're playing. Number 2, and perhaps most important, that they are in direct coordination with the proto-intelligence. See, people understand this. In demonology, specifically Montague Summers, this is going to be a game changer for many who are into this research right now. Montague Summers was documenting phenomena hovering over recently deceased men in graveyards. And then going back to grimoires and looking at the fact that the ritual required semen from recently deceased men. So the phenomenon was working hand in hand with the practitioners. So there's an overarching proto-intelligence, right, that they're in communication with. We would call it consciousness or something that they work with. And so there are certain rules and laws that they follow. Now, to kind of go deeper here, some of the research that Barry Fitzgerald and I, like, not doing it together essentially, but doing the same research and then kind of touching base on it, that there's a difference between the manifestation and the incarnation of the phenomenon. So again, where I have cases where the phenomenon, if it's perceived from the peripheral, it's different than what it is when it interfaces with you. This is also going to blow your mind. Did you know the Skywatcher group, that what they're realizing is what they're seeing with their eye is completely different than what they're capturing with the camera?
Yeah,
Because
that's
the
actually happened quite a
phenomenon-
bit when it came to the New Jersey drone situation.
Absolutely. So my point here is that the phenomenon itself is helping these practitioners modify their appearance in our eyes and fulfill their rituals. And so there is this kind of umbrella And that's why I call it the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception, because they are following ritualistic rules. Now, let's get deeper. What can we do? Unfortunately, like I said, the difference between manifestation and incarnation, when we perceive it, our mind is not quick enough to see it shaping itself into the archetype. There's a learning matrix employed, like that case study I've had with the experiencer who was being taken as a child, and the entity would manifest, again, pulling from the proto-intelligence and her mind itself, this image of her favorite cartoon. And she said that after, this is fascinating, that for years it never, they never came back for, but one day they did, and that it was trying to hold its image of the cartoon, right? Using the observer effect. What do you want me to be? Not my pathology. I'll do whatever I want to you, right? But what do you want me to look like so I can bypass your human behavior and moderate it in my likeness? And so again, the learning matrix is there. And so she's interfacing. I call these interface events. And the entity is trying to hold its form. Now, this is profound because it touches on your point. And she said that once it realized that I didn't really buy into the incarnation of the phenomenon, its eyes started moving back and forth, and it got real close to her. And she said, Nathaniel, the only way I can explain it is that it was measuring my belief in the image. And so my point here is believing in that image it presents empowers the proto-intelligence behind it.
Right.
It is consent. Who do men say that I am? This is why we have no cases of Yahweh abducting people. There is no archetype to inhabit. And so it gets very deep very quickly. But
I wonder then if that is such a dangerous thing that these things can inhabit an archetype and we can believe it, if maybe that is the real issue with like images of God or taking idols and things like that.
Right.
It also strikes me that
wow, that's a crazy thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
It also strikes me that
without a group of dumbasses who continually interface with them and do ritual on their behalf, that these things would be incredibly restricted in the amount that they could even interact with us.
That's the question. Are they powerless? Yes. Are they weak? Or is this just a way for them to, like, are they going to do it anyway?
It's almost like they're weak unless we make them strong.
Is that the case?
Well,
I don't know.
So when they incarnate, this is incredible. Again, I kind of picture with my ADHD, but Barry Fitzgerald has this theory, and I think it's worth considering. So there is kind of a time frame early on when the phenomenon manifests, okay, but then it incarnates as the archetype. In the incarnation, in the interface event, we have maybe 30 seconds to fight back. Here's why I say that, and here's why Barry says that, is because we have case studies where the image it's presenting wants to be believed in. So what it starts doing is it starts thinking for the experiencer. We see this in incubi literature. I'm not just presenting as your husband. Now I'm confirming it in your own mind that I am your husband. And so there, in the one case study I had where the woman is in bed, this is crazy. She's in bed, entity comes to her side. She looks at it. It configures the archetype. Now it's her husband. The physiognomy held for about 30 minutes. She's put into this slumber, like this stupor. They copulate. Now it's to the side again. The stupor is lifting, and she sees that there are physiognomical or anomalies, right? And it's not holding its shape. And so what she said, what it essentially did was it manifested as a husband to her, and then manifested through her to agree with the image. I'm going to think for you. Of course I am. And so after the stupor lifted, that's when her memory was replaced. And she turned back to her side, and her husband was actually asleep next to her. So it had actually put her in a stupor, put her husband asleep. And so my point here is that the data set tells us, at least, that we only have a portion of time when it incarnates to fight back. Beyond that, the phenomenon has proven the ability to manipulate our awareness to the point that we are no longer in control.
And this really highlights the actual logistical dangers of ancestor worship.
Of course.
Because these things have the ability to take whatever form suits you.
Right.
Not even suits
There
them,
we go.
suits you. And to whatever degree, you know, they exist in this dimension or this realm where they can observe and they can influence, but they can't physically interact. But that means that if you can't physically react and you've got all the time, whatever time is for them, in the world, then all you're doing is data chunking. You're just taking in information, the most intimate information you possibly can on this person, their loved ones, what makes them tick, how they're vulnerable, what they're emotionally subjectable to. Yeah, it's fucking really dangerous.
Yeah, it's increasingly dangerous and exceedingly at that. And people don't understand this. Now, if we are dealing with a proto-intelligence that seeks to be seen to incarnate, then we really understand CE5.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What do they? That's the observer phenomenon, right?
That's my point. Yeah, my friend. So now we're literally being groomed by entities that seek to be seen.
Yeah.
And this is why I believe it's like, okay, I'm not just manifesting, I'm incarnating now. And by weaponizing the observer effect, I'm telling you, this is exactly why the CE5 movement's realizing, okay, that's what it looks like here, but it's something completely different on camera.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is if we don't even know what they look like, how can we trust what they're telling us?
Right.
Seems like an obvious enough.
Go ahead, Top.
It's an obvious enough question, but nobody really. Yeah. Everyone is stupefied by the splendor of this thing.
Yes.
You know, it's presenting itself. And I get it. You know, they might even be lowercase g gods. When you look at them, they're going to be fantastic. Yeah. But like, if you don't understand what they are, and the church has done a miserable job of like covering this and explaining these core concepts of the religion.
Moved into this materialistic paradigm, especially here in the West, and that paradigm has no place for the supernatural. And so we live in a society where they're telling you it doesn't exist. And then when you have an undeniable experience, that just by nature of it being something that's not supposed to exist, that there's a human proclivity to jump from amazement to
worship,
conviction or worship. Yeah. But to be convicted in the sense that this is the truth, this thing that you've experienced is definitively true in the way that you perceive it to be. And that is, it's like you're primed for that type of experience, for falling for that when you're told that this kind of shit doesn't exist at all, and then all of a sudden you're tangoing with it.
You're being groomed by something that, to this day, our brightest scholars in academia are still unable to quantify. That's why, my friends, that even the Hebrew authors, when they did refer, specifically this necromancer, the way the Hebrew letters were constructed and the way it was phrased, it's the one-off. We don't even know what she is because we don't even know who she's in contact with. And so, yeah, they were literally groping in the darkness. And so if we're 2,000-3,000 years removed and we still know like very little about who they are, then I'm telling you, at least from my perspective, it's all I have is pathology. And that's why it's like, the research that I'm doing is leveraging. Like I don't have relationships. I don't have, I'm close to my family, but I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have kids. And if it gets too dark, like recently, I just started disconnecting myself from researchers, which I will reconnect back with them, of course, when it starts to cool off. But yeah, they didn't even know how to quantify it. And so the best way they could was that, number one, because of where they exist or the knowledge that they're pulling from, they do appear to be in the afterlife. And because of the ritual nature of their pathology, they do appear to be performing ceremonial magic on individuals. But we still don't understand fully what's going on here. And there's a reason for that.
Well, before we get to that, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this narrative that seems to emerge pretty consistently. I know that they change their visage for us, and sometimes they even change their message, but some messages are more common than others, and they kind of rise to the top and they become part of the narrative. And the message that we're getting a lot of now is this comes from the UAP thing. I believe this came also from the Iliad that Puharaj communicated with. It's also something that the telepathy tape kids are talking about, and it is this coming calamity that they seem to be feigning concern, and maybe they're not feigning, maybe there is something that's coming, but either way, I feel like they're feigning it, concern with the trajectory of our species, but also the condition of our planet. And what's emerged over time. Now, you talked about Fringe, and when we spoke to Fringe, she had also received a message about mankind's ascension, but also the state and condition of our planet. And that concern was a coming polar shift, which is something that we keep touching on over and over and over again. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, Fringe is an amazing researcher. I admire her and her work, and people like that we have to protect, because the phenomenon will go after them, and that's what I'm really worried about. And I think I've stressed that in the past, where because specifically, and I mean this with all sincerity, the purity of the research is there. And in this field, we do not have that often. We have people that sign contracts with others, and they have to promote one narrative over the other. It's very rare that we have somebody who is unique as Fringe. And I think that I pray for her a lot. How about that? My point here, though, and this is something that needs to be articulated. Diana Walsh Pasuka mentioned this book recently, When Prophecy Fails. It was in reference to Chris Bledsoe. There you go. It was in reference to Chris Bledsoe. Now, what this group did, they were psychologists, and they performed a social experiment. And this is called testing the spirits, essentially. And what they did is they infiltrated a group of UFO experiencers, and they basically mirrored everything that these people said. And by the way, right? Oh, who were you taken by? Oh, I was taken by these guys. Okay, about 20 of you guys said you were taken by the same people on the same. Well, so were we. Now I'm going to get down to it. It's just like the Philip experiment, okay, where we create a god and the phenomenon incarnates as that deity. This is incredible. So what happens is, at the end of the experiment, what these group of psychologists did is they told them, oh yeah, there's supposed to be this big calamity coming. Have you guys heard this from your abductors and everything? Oh yeah, our guides told us that there's this massive shift coming, and we need to be prepared for it. These guys were making it up. And so what was happening was these experiencers are going back to the guides, and the guides are, oh yeah, they're right, absolutely, yeah, of course I took them. That was me telling them about this. And the psychologists are laughing. And so at the very end of it, they go back and they say, oh my God, the day that it was supposed to happen came and went and nothing occurred. Why? And so these abductees went back to their guides, and the guides fed them another line about, oh well, yeah, well, that's your fault. We're waiting on you guys. So there's always been this idea of, the end of days, right? The eschatological aspect of it, where they claim that some events on the horizon, and it never shows up.
It seems to be counterproductive to them, because it's like they're commissioning us to build all this technology, and that's an elongated process, and certainly there's a goal at the end of that, I would imagine. But if you keep telling people that the world's going to end, well, what incentive then is there for this inventor to, punch a dimensional gateway into your fucking realm?
Dave, have you ever met somebody that's perpetually full of shit? That just can't stop lying anyway. And you're like, why'd you lie about that? Like, I already sort of believed you, but you just went the extra mile to. It seems like that's what these guys are. It seems
counterproductive. It's like, I want you to build this technology. It's going to take a long time, and future generations are going to get it done. You're probably never going to see the fruits of your labor. By the way, it's all going to end soon. You're going to get your poles shifted, and you're going to get tsunamied to death, and the earth is going to split open and swallow you whole. And it's like, I don't know if I have time to make your fucking your beam to punch a dimensional gateway. I don't know if I have time to do that. It just, I don't know. It's a strange thing, because there are those who are doing research who claim to be able to display one way or another that we've experienced pole shifts in the past. And then, of course, you have the whole Nibiru narrative and what a celestial body like that would do if it came into proximity with our solar system. It would flip things all over. And so you have like this kind of pseudo historical evidence for it, and you have some science based around the concept. And then there are people today who are observing the Earth's magnetosphere and determining that magnetic north and magnetic south have deviated substantially. And so all these things are kind of giving that breath, they're pumping it up a little bit. But I don't know. It just seems like why then? Why even bother if it's but I guess it's just a matter of getting us to trust them.
Yes, yeah, and it goes back to the Philip experiment where they created an entire history. They falsified an entire history of an entity, how he died. And here's what's scary, guys. When they went and performed the seance, the channeler, the psychic medium, had no context as to who they were trying to conjure. But guess who showed up? I'm gonna go down a little rabbit hole here again. And it's Philip, and Philip knows everything. Matter of fact, young lady, I was watching you last night when you wrecked your car on the way to work. So it's the pathology is narcissistic, where I will become that archetype, and then I will inhabit it, and then I'm going to prove to you what I know, and then I'm going to want something from you. It gets back to like my buddies Barry and Steve. They just released an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and they're working with the psychic medium, and this entity named Becky was in contact with the medium. And they told me about this in England, so I had to kind of keep it hush hush until the episode is released, but now I can talk about it freely. And they were testing it, and Becky would know, like, oh, hey, Steve, how was your bath last night? Or 5 minutes later, hey, this guy's on the phone. Oh, Becky wants to know how your bath was, and weird stuff, And one day he tested it and said, okay, here's a watch. He didn't even tell me, he's swinging it, and he goes, okay, ask Becky what I'm holding in my hand. And the entity answered and said, it's a pendulum, Steve. Next question. So when they were in contact with her, they began to kind of push back, like, what's your history? Where are you from? And so the entity gave a falsified her entire identity. I died in a plane crash in this part of the country, and here are my kids' names, and this is my address. And so when they looked it up, it was all fraudulent. Now, again, it's and here's the real issue about it with respect to consciousness. Egregores and tulpas, it goes deeper than that, right? Tulpas being thought forms. It's almost like that they are thought forms, but they're also the entity forming the thought that becomes the thought form in seances. So my point here, guys, is that what we're looking at is that they do. I can go into another case study where these entities told Barry and Steve, you're going to go to a paranormal conference in France. They had no intentions to do that. No contracts were signed, right? No stipends were given. And about a week or two later, they get an invitation. Oh, by the way, we just wanted to, we wanted to invite you to a conference. Oh, where's it at? It's in August, and it's in Paris, France. So in their work called Project Doorway, they've tested some of these entities, and they have at least a knowledge of at least the future up to 12 months. But what seems to be interwoven in there, and this is what's scary, again, is that there are some entities that want to make you think they have knowledge.
Yeah.
And they don't. And so they kind of play that role. And so what they do have, and I can keep going, but yeah, so the trickster archetype, it is present. But my fear is that people have harped on that to the point where the phenomenon can act like it's just trickster. And it's not. It's actually doing something very pathological to us. And we just don't understand it.
That phenomenon of clairvoyance, too, or future sight, or whatever you'd like to call it, does manifest itself in schizophrenic patients. Occasionally, they'll have this momentary foresight of the immediate future. And it'll be at the behest of, or rather, they don't have the foresight. They are being told a series of events that are about to take place. They're whispered to about one of the things that I read one time. It was a Reddit forum of I am a bipolar schizophrenic, ask me anything. And what ended up happening, instead of asking questions, the comment section got filled with schizophrenics who were just talking about their experiences. And one of the highest rated ones was a man talking about how these things have the ability of precognition to sometimes what seems to be almost an inconsequential level. And what I mean by that is, like, it'll say things like his story in particular was he was on a bus one day. The voices were particularly loud and aggravating, and at some point they all kind of synced up and just started telling him over and over again about the man with the yellow shirt, over and over and over again, the man with the yellow shirt. Next bus stop pulls up. who gets on but a man in a yellow shirt who sits directly in the open seat next to him. So, their legs are effectively touching. And, it's strange. I think even Dr. Jerry Marzinski talked about patients of his who were led to money and drugs that were otherwise obscured and hidden, by the drug dealer. And
Absolutely.
and they were led to like let's say a field where they flipped over a board and there's the guy's stash. And so
Yes.
all of these things that, schizophrenia, the Galactic Federation of Light, lowercase g gods, all of it, it seems to be exactly what you're saying, Nate, which is the same phenomenon, just presenting itself differently.
100%. Yeah, using the observer effect to collapse different forms of the same phenomenon, the same entity. I'll take it a step further, where I do not believe that these conjurers are in fact conjuring the phenomenon. I believe that they're the ones being conjured. And I'll dare say that in these rituals, they're not saying their names. They're the names being said by them. And so it's exactly what Marzinski said. Get in this car, and 30 minutes later, you won't know where you are. Why? Because something is beckoning you, allowing you to believe that you have human free will. But by the time you realize what's going on, you're opening the door of a crack house, you're being handed a kilo, and now you're being set in a new direction. This is the problem, again, with the conjurer, the whole aspect of the illusion of control. Right? What we're even looking at now is there seems to be a transcendent order of magic here. Okay, so my case study with the remote viewer, he was out of body when he met his guides. But when he got back into his body, they had carved religious amulets and sigils from underneath the skin to the surface.
Oh, yeah.
So whatever we're dealing with, again, it's not just ritual, but it's like, okay, it taps into human free will. And specifically with the CE5, if they are in fact conjuring us, then it's almost like the phenomenon is conjuring us to conjure it. How? I want you to observe me. And by seeking to be seen, it helps me incarnate into this dimension. And so this, again, seeing to us is seeding for them. Observe me. You're going to think that, oh, wow, right, you're conjuring me. No, you're helping me be conjured. And it's that symbiotic relationship that I'm researching. Is this making sense? Hopefully.
It's making a lot of sense.
It's making sense, but what doesn't make, it's not your part that doesn't make sense to me. It's their part, because it seems like they're after worship, but they can manipulate you or influence you to a certain level, but can never really tell you their name or present themselves to you to receive this worship which they want. So it's like,
Yes.
What are you doing?
That's a little, that's an interesting thing, because it seems that they don't want veneration to go towards, like, let's say God the Father, the creator of everything, right? They want to keep that from happening. And historically speaking, they fancied putting themselves in positions of power, like being gods, and accepting that veneration and worship. And then there's also this other side of them too, where if it's not veneration and worship, they will take fear, and they seem to feed off fear.
Yes, that happened to me as a child. I mean, it's I've talked a lot about it, like, because I had to go through therapy over that. Like, what is all this and that kind of stuff. But yeah, and so the fear aspect, it also empowers the proto intelligence. I realized that when I was young, where the phenomenon would induce me into looping nightmares, and we're not, like, I can't get you guys demonetized, right? If I say,
No, you could say whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Well, it was a looping nightmare of it was two young people, maybe about 20, not too young. They were on a picnic table with their backs turned towards me. The guy on the right had a needle in his arm. I didn't even know what insulin was, much less heroin. I was 8 years old. I was very innocent. And so then the guy next to him had a 357 Magnum. It's a black gun. And so as I'm approaching them, the guy on the left turns to me, grins, and puts the gun in his mouth, pulls the. You'd think I'd wake up, but no. The looping nightmare would just begin where it ended, right? Or so, and I would be walking up to them again, and then we'd make eye contact. He'd grin, pull the boom, back in it again, walking. And then when the phenomenon wanted me to wake up, that's when I would see this black cloud hovering in the corner of my room. And the only way I could explain it was like it was pulsating, like it had its own heartbeat, and it was feeding off of my fear. So what I had to do as a young person, and I always did this alone, I guess, because they say, you know, the tests are always taken, right? Was it when the teacher's not in the room or something like that?
Yeah.
I forget, something like that, right? I probably murdered that. But my point here is that it was influencing my thoughts. And so it would say, like, you're not worth anything. And it would test you. Do you believe it, Nathaniel? And then the longer I believed it, now I wasn't just thinking, I was being thought for. I had given all of my consent over to an intelligence that is literally feeding itself through me. So what I learned to do, I mean, I would go to sleepovers, you know, back in the day when GoldenEye was popular and we got Cheetos, Mountain Dew.
How old are you?
I'm 36, man. You know,
Oh, hell yeah, me too.
Age.
Let's go. GoldenEye days. Those are great.
Mountain Dew and nothing but hours of gaming. And, oh, man, you know, we ate and drank like kids and just whatever. So anyways, you know, man, I miss it. Yeah. And so we were both like maybe 8 years old, right? And my buddy, I would always, like, I stayed at his house, and so his mom was a single mother, and so because of how young we were, right, we would switch. So I would sleep in his bed at night, and then he would sleep in his mom's bed with his mom, and so, but I could see her room right across the hallway, right? I could see it, and so I'm there. It's like 3 a.m. now, and it's very silent in the house, right? You can hear a pin drop. And I'm looking, and I see both of their bodies in the bed. And yet I see something. And I could hear something displacing its weight on the stairway. I could hear creak, creak. And it's exactly what I experienced in my own house. And so what I realized was that what the phenomenon was doing is it would appeal to my senses. And then when I'm fearing it, when I'm observing it, it would continue the evolution of materialization. And so I had a coping mechanism, and that was I would disbelieve anything and everything it told me, and I started to starve it.
Nice.
And I starved it to the point where it just stopped bothering me. Now, I can say this. In the past, when I have done some of the darker research, that phenomenon would come back again. And I told this to another host of a show yesterday, where I've been in houses where murders have taken place, where just before I got there, they had to cut up the carpet, where one of the victims, the husband, had to all the way down his body. And the murderer had broken the tip of the knife into his bone, and they didn't notice it until it's too late. So they had to actually go back in, not to be verbose and disgusting here, but they had to cut up the carpet. And I was in there as we're looking at shadow figures and orbs and the families crying, got atheists there. I don't even believe in this stuff. I've been there. And yet that kind of evil is nothing like what comes to me when I'm doing some of the deeper research. Whatever that is, it's not about archetypes.
Man,
Not
let me
about
tell you,
apparitions.
what's happening to Tony Merkel right now, and in a sense, what happened to me before we even started this show. I had no intention ever to start this, but it's the same thing. I had fled New York, moved to Florida because of COVID insanity, and about a year into being here, my wife gets deathly sick, in bed for a month, didn't know what to do. And I had no aims at doing this at all. I didn't even know David. He's just a complete stranger to me. And then to start what we're doing now, and especially to the level that we're doing it now, absolutely zero intention. But when I look back and I think on it, I'm like, something kind of wanted me to stop. I had thoughts of saying, I'm going to go back to New York. I can get my job at the MTA and forget all this bullshit because it's not worth it. And I'm waiting for the next thing to happen as we're on the eve of this huge thing that we're about to set off. But yeah, that is real. That discouragement that's set upon you. But the Bible says 365 times, fear not. And
Fear not.
the things that what we call our fan base, I mean, we're horrible to them, but we've branded them as dangerous retards because to be retarded, like retardio means what does that mean exactly again?
Retardio means return to God.
Retardio. Yeah, that's right. So when you put those things together, we return to God. But if you're retarded, if you're too stupid to understand the fear that you're in, you're not going to be afraid. And when you're not afraid, you can do some pretty cool stuff. And that's just how I operate. Like in the face of fear, in the face of things that we should not be doing, I think I'm just too stupid to stop. Tim Pool told me that I'm too retarded to stop, and he's right.
That's been the heart of this entire show. Everything that we do is like too stupid to feel the fear. But
we shouldn't do that thing, but we're like too dumb to do it. And that's a big part. I love what you're saying there about that idea of fear. Like, can you feed it? Is that Top Lops' dog, man? Am I right about that? Can it kill me if I'm not? I'm not even gonna look at it. Yeah, well, you can't.
There's two types of people I've noticed in this phenomenon, and maybe there are more categories, but it seems predominantly there are two. Now, we're calling it the phenomenon, but within the phenomenon, there seems to be different types of entities with different MOs. There has to be, right? Because why are some people glorified feeding troughs up until their untimely death? These things will push them and push them. You're worthless. You can't do it. Nobody likes you. You're this, you're that. And those voices will get louder and louder till you're institutionalized or you take your own life, right?
Yep.
And then the other side of it is, I commission you to build this technology for me. What is the difference between those two people? Why are some of them just preyed upon until death? And why are some of them commissioned to execute their work?
I think that Jack Parsons' case study kind of blends both of those individuals together, where he was afraid that they were going to take his soul, and he is the creator of the JPL and basically our entire rocket program. So even then, and this is, I think, one of the more disturbing aspects of it, is even practitioners, and I'm not talking about people that are out there, oh, I'm a practitioner. No, I'm talking about people that bag our groceries, that literally do their best to hide, right? In some of them, I've discovered some of them in actual churches where, like what they claim God gave them this revelation. It's like, no, that's in a grimoire. That's weird. I mean, but anyways, I guess my point here is that they seem to be in partnership with these forces, and they think that as long as they fulfill their will, or as long as they make the sacrifice, as long as they provide worship, that the phenomenon will pity them, it will take it easy on them. And yet that's not really the case. I know of one lady that tried to do that, and it's worse than the hitchhiker effect. 'Cause I hate the term hitchhiker. That implies consent. It's hijacker. It just takes.
Yeah.
Without without even knowledge of it occurring. Anyways, my point here is that this individual was a practitioner. She was an occultist, and she's, encountering these forces and basically giving whatever they want to them. And then suddenly her dog dies, and then her rabbit just stops eating, right? Then she gets divorced. She files for bankruptcy. And the last thing that happened to her was she had a fatal diagnosis, like a terminal illness. And so what I'm not implying is that everybody has a terminal illness. That's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is that the phenomenon, or at least some of these entities, can cause issues in lives where it seems normal. Guys like Barbara Bartholic, right? They threatened her, and next thing you know, she's on the highway on the way to a Thanksgiving dinner, and somebody cuts her off or throws her husband out, kills the husband. And so the lie that these people are being taught, I'm talking about even in ufology, they're building altars in their homes.
Yeah.
The lie is, as long as I peddle the narrative, they'll take it easy on me. And I'm telling you, like, if what Jordy Rose is doing, and I know he's doing it, but if his hypothesis is anywhere near accurate, then what he's describing is a species that has merged scientism, the worship of science, with necromancy, which is ancestral worship and veneration. And the only thing he could quantify and even articulate at this point is the quantum computer, or the Ouija board, the electronic Ouija board. He didn't really have a vocabulary for what they're trying to conjure. And what I fear the most is that if our model of the phenomenon is wrong, And if we inherited that from men who in their humanity and sincerity had a limited knowledge, they didn't have a background in phenomenology, right? They just had a couple of scriptures their Sunday school teacher taught them. And I'm not being disrespectful. I'm saying that's what I was given.
Yep.
Say 2 prayers, call me in the morning.
Right.
If that is what we have to operate off of, and what materializes in the earth is so transcendent than that, then we have not taught the people how to fight back. We've not educated them in the phenomenology. And perhaps more importantly, there will be another Jesus who manifests to them, and they will not know how to test it. Can I suggest that now these same people are going to AI to determine divinity in their lives?
Man, what a crazy.
Who do men say that I am? I got chills, brothers. Who do men say that I am? Let me go to artificial intelligence. Let me go to AI. And this is the profundity of the research. This is worth laying the life down and saying, guys, look, I've got to bridge the gap here, because my fear, and this is why I've had to separate myself from researchers for a period of time, because I have to get this information. I have to, number one, understand it, articulate it. That way, when I come back into the field, I can say, guys, this is what I think we're dealing with. But it's not just for us. It's for the next generation of experiencers who, in the event of the abduction, will go back to Geordie Rose's quantum AI and quantum computers. And just like the guides, who, by the way, I'll go into this and I'll kind of tie it into Geordie Rose's hypothesis here. What we're seeing here, it appears, again, it's not just the observer effect where we're collapsing various forms of the same entities, but now what we're looking at are the archetypes conversing with each other in real time, where we have abductees who believe that they are in contact with their guides, and then when they're abducted and bad, sinister things are done to them, they go back to the guides. And now here's what's happening. It's one of two things. It's malevolent, sinister, but it's one of two things. Either the guides reinterpret the unspeakable horror they experienced, say things like, well, it was done to you because it was done for you. Or you
you're
agree
special, by the way.
You're special, yeah. Of course, yeah. We've got sigils all over your body because you're special. Either that's happening, and we're seeing that in real time, and it's what makes me so angry about ufology, where there's one researcher who, like, people are like, this one woman was like, they did really bad things to me. And he's like, well, yeah, but you need to go channel Seth. So what we're looking at, again, is now that we've acknowledged the observer effect, collapsing various forms of the same entities. Now what he's I guess, advising people to do is to go ask the entity about the entity.
He's just asking one puppet what the other puppet's doing. You know what I mean? And
it's a human centipede.
Yeah. Is this making sense in the chat? I'm probably getting murdered in there.
No, dude, no, you're not. No. Our audience is familiar with a lot of this.
They're saying a lot of racial slurs, but none at you.
They do, yeah.
They're
I swear they don't even watch the show. They just say like racial slurs in the chat. But no, I think that does make a lot of sense, and I think that people, it's a really convenient thing to go, hey, these things are forcibly kidnapping you in the middle of night. They're assaulting you. You're taking in some cases a pregnancy to whatever term, and then the pregnancy is stripped from you, and then sometimes later on in the life, these women are forced to see their hybrid children in some traumatic fashion. And how do you alleviate that? The same way they've been doing it the entire time. They rebrand.
Well, the woman you're talking about, was that Carla Ruckert? That like channeled Seth, because I did some research on her.
There's a few of them. There's a few of them.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, literally, yeah. It's Seth, the guy. Oh, I'm Seth.
Because she's another one who's like, it seems like she's channeling the nine and the law of one, ends up channeling Seth, and goes through some ritual sexual abuse or sexual magic, and it's just it's probably
changing hands. Now, in the lecture that I did at the Awakening about over a year ago now, is the Awakening UK. It was called Molters, the host, the hybrid, and the copy. And I went into how these entities are creating replicas of life or similages of their existence in order to, again, further their existence. But in it, I describe what I believe the phenomenon to be, at least as an allegory or a way to understand it. The phenomenon evolves according to our awareness of it. That's the observer effect. We can at least acknowledge that to a degree. But with respect to the archetypes it incarnates as, it's sharing information. Not that they're separate entities, it's one intelligence. And so I likened it in the lecture to the spider-tailed Iranian viper. Have you heard this yet?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, I do know that creature though. It's got it's a viper with what looks to be a anatomically correct spider on its tail.
Now, this is the phenomenon, the difference between the phenomenon manifesting, that's the proto-intelligence, and the phenomenon incarnating, and that's the spider. So here what we have is a snake. Its primary prey are birds. And so what it realized is that in order to get what it's hungry for, it has to become what its prey is hungry for. So it evolves. I'm going to conjure you, but I'm going to allow you to think you're conjuring me. And so the snake hides underneath the rock in the shade, takes its spider tail, flips it out there in the sun. Here's what we do. That's incarnation. The bird zooms in and says, that's a spider. It starts to apply spider rules. That's a guide. A guide's, it's good interest. It has been. There we go, right? Yeah. Oh, that's my dear ancestor, my dear Aunt Edna. And so it dive bombs in, and when it latches on to the spider, there's a sharing of information from the tip of the tail to the head of the snake. It's not a spider anymore. It's a snake. And the proto-intelligence emerges from the shadows, takes off the archetypal mask, and now we're interfacing with a species we didn't even know existed.
And we definitely don't know the rules of engagement.
There we go. Right. And so what happens is what we're hungry for is hungry for us. What we're conjuring is conjuring us. And it puts us right into the position of now we need to discuss CE5, the implications of it. I felt called to go out and observe. There's something calling you to be an observer. And that, my friends, is the difference between manifestation and incarnation. We become co-creators.
Wow.
Of the archetype. Who do men say that I am, my friends? Why? It matters. It matters. You good, bud?
Yeah.
It's not often that you leave David speechless, because now I'm like, I don't even know. That's a spiral of a thought process that I have to take later. Oh my God.
Especially the whole concept of, what it does to me is it highlights that there is a tremendous weakness in them.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because the deception they have to deploy in order to operate and how much they rely on our consent and interaction with them almost suggests that without those things, they ain't shit. They really can't do much of anything at all. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to an adversary, one that is constantly making an effort to change forms and deceive you tells you that without that function, it's almost like it's not much of a threat. It's the idea of that when Satan is casted out before the people, they'll look upon him and go like, damn, that's fucking what we were all.
Yeah, that's what my mind went to. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also this idea of, so Joe and Franco, he was on Blurry Creatures recently. He's the dude from the telepathy tapes. I think he's like a minister, but he was talking about his experience in India where these people were keenly aware of the gods that they venerate. And he asked them, he's like, hey, why do you do that? And they say, oh, we do to keep them off of us. And that is not, it's like, it's not the right answer. That's why India is covered in human feces. But then also to say, not to like, crap on your narrative, David, but these things are quite dangerous. Like, I don't understand.
But it's like only if their deception holds up. The second it starts to come apart, then the danger is gone. It's even like you listen to these, and let's not even go to the whole casting them out in the name of Jesus, because there are instances where that doesn't work.
Well,
right?
could that be like a human form that you were talking about, Nathaniel?
Maybe, but what I'm getting at is that outside of that, dismissing them in the name of Jesus or casting them out in the name of Jesus, you will often hear other stories like, I was visited by like people who aren't religious. I was visited by a ghost, and the ghost kept showing up over and over again, and eventually I just asked it to leave. And whether or not you believe that that ghost left, to that individual, perceivably speaking, it left. And so whatever actually happened there, even if it's laying in the cut and waiting to come back in some nefarious way because you actually didn't get it, which is very possible, it still needs to do a song and dance. It's not this omnipresent, incredibly powerful thing that can, it needs to, it's like, let's say it is deceiving you and it's going to go away temporarily. It sees you as, what would be the word? It sees you as a worthy enough opponent that it needs to deceive you.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's taking you with some sort of you have levity in that situation.
Do you
are
remember,
a formidable foe.
You remember the story from this guy Pontus that wrote to us about Patty? So again, back to our NDS Chronicles. His friend, this person's friend Patty, was under some kind of demonic oppression, and while he was at her house, like he would pray for her, and they would try to help. He actually saw the entity on the roof of her house while they were outside, and he rebukes it. He tells it like, go away. And the entity actually goes like to a peak and says, I'm far enough. Like this is, I can go this far, but I have the right to be here. It's still like I am a respect. I'm like, what does that mean? Like you are a respectable distance from, because he told you to leave, but you still have claim over Patty or whatever. There are rules, man, that we have no clue about.
There we go. And they've made it that way.
Yes, we've been stripped of our understanding of that.
Exactly right. And some of the, not even some, most of the propaganda we're getting now, even from the church, and I hate to say that, it's like, it's again, it's, take two of these, even the threshold covenant. Like that was forced upon me at a young age. I'm like, this can't happen. This can't be happening. Threshold covenant. It's like, no, it's happening. My dad was a minister at his church. I was an innocent kid. So there are things that are intentionally being propagated by the phenomenon that seem to be coping mechanisms, right? Where, okay, yeah, this works. And then they're employed, and the phenomenon sometimes even gets stronger. But to your point about the rules, there even in Iggy literature, there was one case study where, first of all, if we can believe them, right? There was this one case study where it was a newlywed couple who go, on the honeymoon, and they consummate their marriage. After the immediate consummation, boom, entity materializes. Now, here's where we get into the pathology of possession. Okay, it's a pathogen. It's the ultimate hijacker. It starts here and ends up here. It starts outside, it ends inside. It was through the act of penetration that the entity possessed her. Okay, this is some of the darker nuances of my work that I don't get into because I can't, but we're not alive.
No, because we joke about it a lot too. We say I have a t-shirt. I own a t-shirt company, and it's a bunch of spaceships on it, and they're going through a portal that somebody drew, and it looks like buttholes. So it says interdimensional buttholes. Yeah, I do. I wore it to the bank. It's like, it was crazy. But it's there is something, it's funny, right? But I'm presenting you a very serious idea. Like these craft are going interdimensionally through what looks like a butthole. And then you look at like the rituals that they would perform specifically with children. It seems to revolve around that. Crowley was kind of into that.
Magic is a fundamental component to a lot of this research. That's
there's life.
What Crowley was into.
There's life being given from the vagina of the woman, and then there's something else going on with that other hole that is, it's a portal. Thank you, Kate.
Well, if you asked Juan Ayala of the One-on-One podcast, he would say it's the portal through which the homunculus is birthed.
Yes, it's quite crude, but they're doing this stuff, and we are like, I don't know. The funny thing is the culture dabbles in it, right? Like we love. Just recently, it was a whole, what this episode's going off the rails. The whole phase, and I was like, what are we even doing, guys? This is a trend. There is so much significance to this idea of fornication, the penetration of any of these holes. It's like, dude, you're dabbling. I wish somebody would have told me this when, but in the church, my parents' best explanation, like why you shouldn't have sex before marriage, is like it's a sin. God doesn't like it. It was like, whatever, feels good. I'm going to do it, you know? And that's what most people do is like, but why? But why? It's because there is a significance to this ritual that you're doing with somebody that you love, you don't love, that you don't even know.
Yeah, you're touching on something here. It's that, okay, like getting back to that case study where they interrogated the entity after it possessed the wife. And in the interrogation, this implies rules if we believe them. But they said, why didn't you do this to her prior to, her getting married and consummating? He said, because we were forbidden to touch her until she's been touched. Now, my friends, this follows the line of thought into abuse.
Yes.
Like, I had a case years ago during COVID. This is very, very sinister too. And it was a friend of my family where I just get this phone call at like 2 in the morning. At the time I was working second shift, and I just enjoyed my nights, right? It's summertime. I'm out in the parking lot in my driveway, brother, just hanging out. Boom, phone call. What's going on? What can I do? Well, we're at the ER. They won't let us in to see our daughter, but she's having gastrointestinal issues. I said, all right. They're like, what can you do for us? Can you tell us what's going on? So I prayed and everything, and I had a vision. And in the vision, there was this man confessing his sins to me. It was on my left side. I don't understand it. It made no sense. His name was Dan. He stunk like BO, and he smoked and had a mustache. I said, who am I looking at? And she said, that's my daughter's biological father. I said, well, this man's a rapist. Yes, he is a rapist. Unbelievable, weird stuff. So he's confessing to me everything he did. And I promise you this happened. And in the middle of his confession, he says that the spirit that's on me assaulted my daughter. And so then I go into, and I'm seeing, and this is why like the church tried to mentor me into prophecy, and I don't want you to be a prophet, all that, whatever. That's a long story. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm in your house now. Like I'm looking at a chair, there's a couch. I was there about 2 weeks. When she gets out, I want you to sit her down and ask her what has happened. I said, because she has been assaulted, and this entity that was possessing the man that assaulted her is now inhabiting her dreams at night. So they sit her down. Come to find out, yeah, she was a college student, went to a party. Some big burly man pulled her into a room, assaulted her. The problem is, this is where the pathology is crazy, that man left, but the entity visited her now. So that entity literally possessed someone to create trauma in her life and then came back to feed on it in her nightmares.
This is like a parasite. This is what a parasite does.
Parasitic, absolutely. Yeah, it's deeper than symbiotic relationship and symbiosis. So my point here is that she was freaking out because even though it wasn't the man, it had the same personality type, right? Because that entity was wearing him as an avatar, had the same bravado and the same smell. It was freaking her out. And so I said, okay, well, once she tells you about that, what she has to do is go get therapy. And when she got therapy, she closed that portal. And so my point here is that some of these entities will cause trauma in lives and use people to do it. And then when they'll pull themselves out of that biological avatar, they'll go hijack that person and start haunting them. And
it's
so
like they create a crack in you, especially childhood trauma, one that they can enter and exit through pretty much at their leisure.
Well, this is the idea of this is going to get, I mean, whatever, this episode is already like off the rails, but the idea of is not like a natural thing like Lady Gaga would say born this way. It's like, no, there's a good argument that this happens at childhood. This happens with trauma.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think the studies
Milo Yiannopoulos got in trouble for saying this. That's what got him canceled. Of all the things he said, it was
of all the things he said. Yeah,
of all the things he said, he's like, I was as a child. That's why I am the way I am. And I'm like, there is something to that. That story is prevalent in this community.
Well, they used to have psychological studies that showed like upwards of 60 to 70% of gay identifying males also suffered some sort of childhood trauma of a sexual variety. And then they stopped doing those studies. So that's not really a point of research anymore. But yeah, I mean, it's like trauma is the gateway. If they can first get you there, they've got you vulnerable, and then they've got an anchor to latch onto, whether it's the person who traumatized you or something like that, and they've got an in that they can enter.
Yes, the pathology is the same. And remember how I said that there seem to be some of these are formerly human practitioners. We don't know what that formerly human aspect of our potentiality is. We call it a ghost, but it's truly not. This is where, again, that the Hebrew authors, they kind of got the concept of the ghost god. And it's from the atrocious epic where it's the ghost of man is made from the flesh of a god. It's that liminal existence. Okay, that's really what I'm trying to articulate. And I believe that's what our ancestors were trying to describe, is that whatever that species is, we don't really have a way to articulate them. Now,
Yes. Do we have a
to
way to
to
battle them? Because this is what Fringe was
right,
talking about, and many people, like
yep.
Alberino, pushed back on us about the name of Jesus getting these things to go away. He said in some cases no, and it's like, are
I'm
those
glad he's being
entities?
honest about that.
Yeah,
That's incredible. Kudos to him, because people want to ride that narrative. And I'm telling you, it's great for likes and clicks. It will feed people's families. But at the end of the day,
It's
right,
not helping Fringe.
it's not helping. Now, we have right now, here is what's going to blow your mind. If we are dealing with a species that's inhabiting another species, or at least putting its consciousness in the avatar, what we could be looking at is the name of Jesus being spoken to the avatar,
right, right, exactly.
not right. And so, if as long as that species has a little bit of free will, you won't initially be talking to the entity. You're talking to the avatar. And so when people, and that's something that I've been toying with. It's a theory. But getting back to rules
Oh,
and the
let me
idea,
say,
yeah,
Nathaniel, there's again, it could be a bogus story, but the guy that he has a book called that he killed Anton LaVey. I forget his name. There's a point where he says Anton LaVey is what's the word, like his spirit
Astral
is like
projecting?
astral projecting and
yeah,
tormenting him in his house, and I
yeah.
guess he could knock stuff over to a certain level, talk to him, and he rebukes him in the name of Jesus. Same thing, get out of my house in the name of Jesus, and he laughs at him
Mhm.
because he's like, I'm not a demon, I'm a human, and I don't respond to that. You
Now
can't
you're
do that.
hitting the nail on the head, right? And this is something that French and I talked about a long time, not a long time ago, but a while ago, where trying to understand why it doesn't work. Even in like some of the research my friends are doing in the UK, we had a conversation where my friend was like, "Yeah," he's like, "It was the most devoted that were the most haunted." And we can kind of internalize that specifically in religiosity, say, okay, of course, right? The devil fights those who he fears the most, that kind of logic. But with respect to hybridism, possession turned into pregnancy. And so there's a difference. It's fascinating. There's the haunting and then there's the hatching. And we're
The
dealing
egg.
with there we go, my friend, absolutely. And that's why in my book, The Skin That Crawls, which I may send that link to you. I don't know if I did or not.
Oh yes, please do. I'm looking it up now.
All right, let me give it to you. But what I'm dealing with again is the golem, the sigilization of the Hebrew word for fetus. That's the golem.
Right.
So what they're doing essentially is it's replicating. Let me see if I can find it, buddy. But yeah, so that's what I'm dealing with lately, and I'm excited. Let's see.
Is it an ebook or is it a physical copy book? What do you got there?
It's gonna be both, buddy. Let me see. How can
Love it.
anyways, I'll send it to you after the show, and then you can kind of put it up. How about that?
Yes.
But yeah, that may very well be what's going on, is where essentially when we deal with these hybrids, it would be an exorcism.
Mm.
That's way different than what was given to me as a kid, right? It's like Michael Scott, right? When he's dealing with Toby, and Toby's like trying to really get him to talk about his trauma in childhood. And Michael Scott's like, yeah, take 2 of these and call me in the morning. That's how, right, I was treated. And it's like, that's not really what's going on. And
It's
yeah,
like
so
I'm trying to gather, the rules of this spiritual realm, the rules of engagement, and it seems sometimes that, they're giving you this rudimentary, like, say these prayers and be done with it.
yep.
But it seems like the reason they have access to you in the first place might be the problem. Meaning, there might be a bit of legalese as to why they are
Yes.
able to interact with you, and maybe until you address that, and you're talking about this childhood trauma or trauma of any sort, and going through therapy and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, maybe until you address that thing that has given them legal rights over you, it's not going to be that simple.
It's something that I spoke with Fringe about. Again, it's like, so like we're saying here, it's like, I agree with you completely that the church has been, I don't want to call it a failure. Actually, I will call it a failure. In its current state, mostly what it is it has failed to prepare us, and it's failed in a bunch of different ways. But what I brought up to Fringe was the idea of baptism, because she says she hasn't been baptized, and that's a ritual that has to do with water purification, and there's something significant with regular clear water, not brackish water. Like, it seems like brackish water is used to trap entities at the bottom of the ocean, but regular clear water was used for this idea of almost an exorcism. So I'm like, maybe check that out, check down that road, because we haven't found the answer. I mean, the name of Jesus worked for David. David had an encounter with an entity, but it doesn't work all the time. So we have to keep asking.
Yes. And I don't think have you guys touched on Ezekiel 13 yet? Those who have the souls of men to make them fly, to cause them to fly? Yeah.
No.
So in Ezekiel chapter 13, this is out of the book Disembodied Souls again. The author is dealing with a species of necromancer that is basically genderless. Some Hebrew words point to female, others male. But it's a species of necromancer that's employing some form of technology in order to trap souls. And that's something I've covered it years ago, but I don't think we have in the interview yet. But yeah, I believe these are the same species, where they hunt the souls of men to make them fly. And it's fascinating. And the idea, again, it's a reference to the Egyptian soul, the Baal soul.
Do you think these entities can, because there's an idea of selling your soul, and without any like knowledge, like solid knowledge about it, I get the inclination that you cannot sell your soul. It doesn't seem like it belongs, it's ours, but it does not belong to us. But trapping it is something that seems like maybe they could keep you in a spot for a little while, but to own it, I don't know.
Well, now we're going in a unique direction. I hope people are still. I
don't want to keep you for. If you got to go, let me know, because I don't want to. I want to respect your time. It's just like, I got questions.
Well, I have a few more minutes.
Okay.
So here is what we're dealing with. Here's some of the fringe, the fringe areas of the research. We have case studies where, like, Whitley Strieber was abducted, and in his encounter, they're taking fingernails samples and cutting his fingernails, and he's asking them, "Why are you doing this?" And they said, "We're making another you." We have cases like one of which Dr. Carla Turner had, where the lady is abducted, and they're threatening her, like, "Listen, if you don't do what we want you to do, we're going to do something to you." And they said, "Okay, well, like, what are you gonna do?" And they pointed at the corner of the room, and there's another body of her, another clone of her. And they said, if you don't do what we want you to do, we'll kill you, and we'll send that back, and nobody will know the difference. So I would suggest, and this is very deep and dark, that not everybody who's returned actually made it back.
Sounds like Kanye West, dude.
Yeah. Does sound like.
By the way, was that a real tweet or not?
Dude,
it was a real tweet. Was it real? I don't know, but
it was a real ass tweet. It was crazy. Yeah, so I mean, once again, that just stems into so much, right? Because we sit now in a space in the conspiracy world where cloning and these underground facilities or potential underground facilities, cloning facilities exist, and Kanye potentially having been cloned, and then of course you have the IVF program.
That's the most sinister. Because we know that Elon Musk is using IVF after he lost his first baby. That's the excuse for creating these designer babies. But Donald Trump is proposing legislation to make IVF not just affordable, but almost like government funded. And with that comes this idea of when the eggs are taken from the woman after the retrieval process, they're then frozen until they're inseminated with the sperm. But when they're frozen, they cost money to store. And if you can't afford IVF in general, you're not going to be able to afford this yearly, monthly, whatever payment to freeze these eggs. That means they're government owned. And that worries me.
Let's get back into, again, we're literally looking at necromancy, which I'll explain here in a second. Necromancy being merged with technology. It's necronetics now. In Israel, what they're starting to do is take deceased soldiers,
Yeah, saw that.
reanimate the corpse, harvest the secretions, the wife or the girlfriend.
That sounds like what you were talking about at the beginning of the show.
Absolutely.
It's the same shit.
Absolutely.
They're not just starting to. They've been doing this. I read that like 3 years ago. I was like, that's strange.
And by the way, it's probably my belly, dude. I'm starving. If you guys hear anything, it's I haven't
I've
eaten
been listening
yet,
to it. I thought you had. I thought they were there. I thought the Phenomenon was in the room with you.
Phenomenon. I actually had somebody email
um,
that to me a long time ago where I think I'm possessed, and I was like, "Why?" He's like, "Because my stomach growls at me," and I'm like,
Well,
"Oops."
I mean, you know, it's sometimes it's better to be cautious. Overly
There we go.
cautious is a thing, but well, why don't we? We're at the 2 hour and 10 minute mark. Why don't we bring it in for a landing here? You know, Nathan, I know you were concerned a little bit about the nature, just because of how it's been received in the past.
Nathaniel. I don't know if he wants like Nate Dogg, Nathan, Nathaniel.
I think Nate Dogg is good. Nate Dogg, there's a big concern about how this is going to be received. Not a big concern. I mean, you're going forward, you're doing this research, you're making your appearances on these shows, and I just want to say that you might find this to be a positive, but I don't think that you ruffled any feathers of our audience. And in fact, much of the research that you've laid out for us here fits in really well with what we've been discussing. And I think that what you're discovering might help us in a very particular area. And I don't just mean us on this show. I mean everybody who is now being awakened to the idea that there is a spiritual realm. We said it a couple times here during this show. We've been stripped of our understanding of it. We don't understand the rules of engagement, and these things are playing multiple games with us. They're presenting as one thing, and we engage with that on a basis that we think we understand. It's actually not that. It's actually something else in the wings, hiding behind that sort of straw man that you're interacting with.
You know, David, you've said multiple times, Nathaniel, that you're like, you separate yourself from other researchers as you do this because you don't want them to get these attachments. And I've thought about this as I do this show. It's like, we're presenting crazy information to these people that some of it could be probably not true, but a lot of it is right on. A lot of it is dead on. And I'm like, am I opening the door to these people to be visited or to have, and I was a little hesitant at first, but I'm like, no, man, this door has been kicked open since COVID.
Yes.
That door has been kicked wide open. And guess what? It's looking at you, no matter if you look at it, if you look at it back. It's looking at all the people that don't listen to the show, all my family members who have their head in the sand. It's looking directly, it's breathing down your neck, and it's about to touch you. So we better start learning how to engage with these things. Sorry, David, continue.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say is it may be uncomfortable information. It may seemingly fly in the face of what you think you knew before. But we need to understand how this works. And we're in a position, humanity is in a position where the old texts have been obfuscated. History's been rewritten a gang of times. His civilizations have been hidden from us. And we are almost at like first base. Like we've got to start all over again in trying to understand this phenomenon. And we have some things that we can look to and use as something to lean on. But a lot of this is going to be new territory. And I have a feeling that in the near future, these things are going to become more prolific in people's lives. I think they are now. I think I might be biased, but from where I'm sitting and the things that I'm looking at, it seems like it's happening more than it used to. It seems like there's been an uptick in this supernatural experience that people are bumping into. And if that's true, if there is a trend upward, if the veil is thinning, if supernatural events are taking place more often than they were previously, well, then it's more important now than maybe ever to understand this other realm that does exist and influences our own physical realm to a degree that we can't even begin to imagine.
Absolutely. We have to grow out of the dogma and grow into the data at all costs.
That's an interesting. I like that. Grow out of the dogma and into the data. One more time. Where can people find you?
Hold on one sec. Look, this is our fans. This guy can come back whenever he wants. So they just book our show now. Yeah. And that's fine. He's here every day.
He's a high level supporter too. So if if you have Z-Man's blessing, then that's as good as anybody's.
Phenomenal. I'll take it. Yeah. And so I'm on Instagram. I was on X, and I couldn't take it, man. Honestly,
it's a bad
I telling you, like I went on for a space. Fringe invited me on and was very graceful, and I really enjoyed my time on there. And just, but X itself it's a cesspool, and so I tried to get back on, and I couldn't take it as long as I thought I could, and so now I'm back off. But you can find me on Instagram here, and yeah, so that's where I'm at.
And the book coming out, whenever it comes out, you have to let us know, because I'm sure, I mean, I'm going to buy a copy, and then I think the people here would be interested. So The Skin That Crawls, that's your next book.
Yeah, The Skin That Crawls. I'm opening up. The opening chapter is the ritual doctrine of non-corporeal conception. And it's about how the observer effect is weaponized against us, where it wants to be observed, and we want to observe it. And so in that interfacing moment, the phenomenon incarnates, and it's anyways, it's going to be interesting. I hope people like it. I wasn't like as known as I am now, not that I'm like some huge celebrity, but I didn't have like publishers, like knocking down my door when I started the book. Now they are, and I'm like, I don't even know if I want to do that, right? I'm just going to publish it myself, and then maybe my second book will be with I don't know, but yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on, man. It's been a blast, and we covered a lot of really germane content.
It was an awesome conversation, and it's one of these that I know we're going to cite back to when it comes to this narrative.
They're going to be exhausted hearing your name. Like, actually, Nathaniel Gillis said.
Nathaniel Gillis says, yeah, that's going to be it. Exactly. Our audience is going to be chewing us up for that one. Is that all we got, Top?
That's all we got. Again, Nathaniel, open door. But guys, until tomorrow, I think we're back. We'll see you later, and don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. Bye.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because they'll laugh in the face